Okay. I've identified a screen to share, and I think if you can see some PowerPoint in front of you, then I've shared.
You are good to go.
Do we see PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, that's wonderful. Well, yeah, so you've made it when you've technically edited one of the books in the Dummies series. That was very funny. It was a gig that one of my college roommates got me because he was an editor for the Dummies series, and I was the first person he thought of when the assignment for urban gardening for dummies landed on his desk. And that actually turned out to be a really fun gig. Yeah. So I'm sure you, as I was gobsmacked by the freeze event of the winter. And I was tapped to write an article about it for the state magazine. There were 3 of us who were tapped for it to look at different aspects of what the freeze did to native plants in the state. And of course, I was a really good person to tap for what did it do in urban settings, because everything I do in my work involves the use of plants in environments that we have changed quite a bit, whether it's around parking lots or new buildings or existing buildings in parks. All of these places have been manipulated by people. And so I did a deep dive this winter because I was interested anyway. And just to orient you, this photo is taken from Confluence Park in San Antonio.
Park, yeah, I knew that's what it was.
Yeah, if you haven't been there yet, you really owe yourself a visit. It is at the juncture of San Pedro Creek and the San Antonio River. And I went right there as soon as we got the power back on and were able to travel pretty well. Within a week or so, I made sure I got there and took photos because I wanted to document how all of those native plants at that site fared as far as the freeze. And here we see some examples. We've got one of the native prickly pears. I'm fairly certain this is Lindheimeri in hanging over the edge of the planter. And then on the right, I believe we're looking at Anisacanthus quadrifidus. That's the Flamacanthus. And down at the low part of the frame, we've got red yucca and some woolly stomodia, which is supposed to be deciduous, looking terrific in this little sheltered location. So I think, as you probably have noticed, I noticed a lot of surprises during this freeze event. So the thing we have had to keep in mind during this whole period is that this is a 30-year event. This is not normal weather. The low temperatures, I know in San Antonio, getting down to 10 and 11 degrees, lasted for an extreme duration. And I had written down the number of hours, but it was well over 100 hours at this below freezing level. So, and much of that at the 10 and 11 degree range. So this is really not something that you would say is unprecedented. We all knew it. If we studied our zone ratings, our zone maps from the USDA, we all knew this could happen, but it hadn't happened in so long that it came as quite a shock. And what it really did for me was bring to mind that there are certain truths about microclimate. And, I just kept coming back to microclimates because those were the things that seemed to be separating the survivors from the plants that truly cratered. And there were a number of other truths that we'll get into as well. But microclimate was the first one. I started looking around as soon as I was able to walk around outside. Started noticing damage in different parts of the garden were different from each other. And we have to keep in mind, of course, that a designed landscape is a situation where all of the exposure, shelter, temperature, and moisture has been manipulated. So right here, this is my front yard. Right in front of the house here, you see the big brick wall. This is a north-facing pocket. So this place really got blasted by the worst of the cold and the wind. And you'll notice that the big Barbados cherries in the background were quite nipped. And we had seen this many winters. You know, we'll see Barbados cherries on a northern exposure turn brown and lose their leaves. But when I show you the next slide, you'll get an idea of how far they were nipped back. So this was right after the freeze. You're seeing, it's interesting that the sotals here, which are Trans-Pecos natives, those barely registered any damage at all. And I think it's because the root system was well established. But the sotals across the path from this that I do not have a photo of, that particular one had I think it had been in the ground for 1 or 2 seasons. So it had tremendous damage to the crown. There were a lot of browned leaves. Then you'll see, if you look at this around I wish I had a pointer here. Can you see my mouse moving? Oh, the miracle of computing. Okay. So you see the mouse moving. This guy, this pink skull cap around here, around the base of this agave, had very little damage whatsoever. So that was a real trooper. And of course, you see a lantana back here, but we expected it to go to toast. The Trans-Pecos native, the Agave Pear right here, I expected it to do very well, and it looked very well in this photo, but you'll see differences over the months when you see the next one. And then this guy, this was an agave hybrid called Blue Glow, hybridized between a couple of non-native agaves, and I expected it to be a total mess. I worked valiantly to save it. And at the end of the day, I ended up cutting it off at the ground. And this is the same view yesterday. And so you'll see that the Agave Pear, it manifested over the weeks following the freeze. It manifested a lot of damage to its leaf tips. The center of the plant was less damaged than the more mature leaves. And you'll also see there's I would say this is an exotic prickly pear, and it's only because it was so small and immature that it survived the whole event. I think it just sat under the snow for long enough that it managed to rally this spring and just go gangbusters. But this is what you would call one of the, it's one of the choyas that they call teddy bear commonly. And I did not expect that guy to live. We also see a living golden barrel cactus to its right, which was a complete surprise. But you'll see, if you look back toward the wall of the house and you see kind of the dark green leafy plants, that is what is left of the Barbados cherry. It all needed to be cut down to a foot or shorter. And so it's just now getting to the point where there are substantial branches that are more than 2 feet tall. So the damage was really variable. You'll see in front, though, you'll see lots and lots of Blackfoot daisy, which didn't blink at all. So I guess what I'm saying is, in this particular microclimate, a lot of the species were affected. And I think a lot of the species were just likely to come through no matter what. So in my study of the different factors that affected the plants, I noticed that the plants that fared worst tended to be in containers. Container plants didn't have the shelter of the earth around them to insulate their roots. And so in this particular container at my office, it was just a real, how do I put this nicely? It was a disaster. Um, and not, I don't believe there was a native plant in this container, but it was a good example of the kind of mess that we were running into in terms of container plants. And sheltered plants were able to survive sometimes. Also, I was noticing that you're going to see a pattern here. The non-native plants were faring worse, and I think that says a lot about the difference between the native habitat and the one they're in. Plants for other continents, their gene pool did not develop for these extreme swings in temperature, and you see that with these sagos here. In my backyard, looked like utter toast right away. They bleached out right in the middle of the weather event. And I spent part of the time while the power was off sitting by the window, leafing through books, trying to figure out what was going to make it and what wasn't. And I had a feeling that the sagos were going to, but I wasn't sure. Um, and the pattern seemed to be that the native plants were showing a greater resilience, which I suppose should not surprise any of us. Another factor, I think, in the how plants fared was their establishment. So the plants that were in the ground for longer tended to be more resilient. In this particular photo, I'm showing you from one of my job sites. This was City Hall in San Antonio, which had just been lushly and fully planted right around December, November and December, before the big weather event. And unfortunately, the storm Uri trampled through and uh, just really turned a lot of things to toast. Uh, Even though this particular palm that you see in the image, this is a Mexican fan palm, most references would say, oh yeah, this will be hardy down to 0 degrees. That doesn't mean that's going to work out in a 30-year freeze event in this climate. And so we found that with many of our native plants as well that were freshly installed. In this image, there are a number of sedges that did not do so well, for example. Now, the signs of plant damage we started to recognize ranged from bleaching, as you see in that Agave Pear on your left, to a cellular rupture that you tend to see in the true succulents. All of the plants with the fleshy succulent material on them, like prickly pears, they tended to manifest in terms, the cell rupture is actually all those little cell walls breaking down because of the ice within them. So they were unable to stand up to it. Like this plant here, which was one of the aloes, which are of course not native. On the right, you're seeing a lot of defoliation on evergreens. And in this particular photo, I'm pretty sure I'm looking at a Pittusporum, again, an Asian native, which its response was to defoliate completely. And then, like many of our native plants, try to regenerate from the crown, sending sap into the branches and see what happened over the spring. Of course, we noticed a lot of our prickly pears suffering I noticed a pattern where one of the species, the spineless prickly pear, Opuntia elysiana, I think is how a lot of people classify it. That particular one was doing very well in my part of San Antonio, although I've heard stories to the contrary in other parts of the city. But that seemed to be the Opuntia, the prickly pear, that came through best. So plants that probably made it, we saw some healthy growth near the crown of some succulents, actually. On the left, you have the Agave Lophantha, or also sometimes sometimes classified as Lophantha splendida. It's the center stripe agave, and it's native to the far west Texas region. And I grow it a lot as a ground cover, particularly in a part shade location. And I was pretty bummed to see that its leaf tips were almost universally scorched, especially in a northern exposure. However, I can report that a lot of it is bouncing back and generating pups. So I have a green arrow pointing one of the pups there in that image. And on the right-hand side, you see lots of green growth coming out of an otherwise burned up Blackfoot daisy. And that has turned out to be a really good performer this year. Also, I was very pleased to see that our native palms, the only native palm to Texas, the Cebal mexicana or Texana, depending upon who classifies it, is doing very well. I shot this particular one. I'm pretty sure this was at San Pedro Springs. Yeah, this was in San Pedro Springs, and palms around town were a mess, but I was going to bet that these were going to make it. And as I've studied across town, it seems like for the most part the Cebal palms have weathered the storm the best, as we would expect because of their long experience in climates near here. So truly native, as I understand it, only into the valley. So we're kind of lucky that they made it up here. And then on the right-hand side, you see a number of sedges that are trying to make it. And I think, I know in my own garden, the sedges fared better than any of the other grassy ground covers, grass type ground covers that are exotics. Then here we see plants that didn't blink. So I had a neat experience at City Hall. We have a bioswale that's mostly planted with native plants. And you see that in the top image. The non-native bicolor iris is the honey-colored grass-like plant that's kind of toast in that image. But the palmetto, which is our native Cebal minor, didn't blink a bit. And many of the plants around it were native, and all of them bounced back this year. Even the frog fruit. It was very impressive. And then in a lower image on the left, you see twist leaf yucca. Most of our yuccas I was finding did not register much damage. I did find the tropical kind of ones, Yucca gigantea was not looking so good, but all of our natives seem to be bouncing back. They might have had a petticoat of dead foliage and then bounce right back from the growing tip. And then on the right, you have, that is four-nerve daisy. And I also had good experiences with desert marigold, Bailiana multiradiata. Both of those plants, ground cover yellow daisies, mostly evergreen, did great in this event and continue to perform through the summer. Again, on the left here, we've got that spineless prickly pear, which if any of you have gotten up close and personal with it, it may not have spines, but then you get introduced to the concept of glochids, which are the little hairs that can just sting like the dickens. And if you haven't met them, I'm sure your pets have. That plant did great. Here it's in a sheltered setting near the Pearl in San Antonio, which probably helped. It's got its back up to a south-facing masonry wall. So you can see the damage it suffered is mostly due to wind in this particular condition. And right across the street on the right-hand image, you see the native Yopon holly. This is the Pride of Houston cultivar, and it performed great in a north-facing situation in kind of a wind tunnel against a tallish building. So one of the big lessons that I took away here was that zone denial comes with risks. We, as designers, I'm guilty of it, and I think most designers are. We tend to push the zones that a plant can take. We tend to incorporate. You know, it's very, very attractive to incorporate West Texas natives and extreme South Texas natives, and even Southeast Texas natives in our plantings here. Because they work in certain situations. We'll pull in lots of wax myrtle for locations that are moister and shadier. We'll pull in a little bit of the far South Texas natives, the different palms. We'll pull in a lot of the West Texas natives, particularly when we're working around a parking lot or a lot of paving. And they perform well for a long period of time. But nature will always point out exactly where they're geared for. And so we need to be aware that those plants are not directly tailored for the spot we have them growing in necessarily. So we have to choose our risks with consideration, not only for what their native area is, but also what is the microclimate we're putting them in. So we tend to really push plants with building buildings that shade them for all but a few hours a day, or expose them to greater winds than they would normally have. So we just need to be aware. Oh, and the glare from windows is a huge factor that can really amplify weather events. So be cognizant of that. There's another issue here. I printed out my article so that I would not forget some major factors that are not really obvious in the slide presentation. We think it's possible that the source of the cultivated plants that we're using could be a factor. For example, we may have plants that are, we fuss with things like this when we're restoring a natural area where, let's say we're restoring land adjacent to the Cibolo Nature Center in Kerr County. We want to be sure that the seed source for the plant we're using is within 20 miles or so that we have a good representation of the native plants that are there. And when we are designing a golf course or a shopping center or the landscape around a school or a home or an office building, those considerations are not there. So if we find that we have an issue with the hardiness of a plant that's native to that ecoregion, we might actually start thinking about, what is that seed source? And is that source hardy enough for this particular location? So that was something that I had thought about and am studying over time. Better established plants will be more resilient. And the natives are tough, but the endemics are tougher. So thinking about, sure, it's a Texas native. In San Antonio, we can get away with planting Texas natives till the cows come home, so to speak. But then Uri comes home, and we learned that the endemics to this particular ecoregion are the toughest of the bunch. I believe that covers what I had to present. But I would be really happy to kind of open up discussion, or however you folks want to manage. I'm trying to get back to where I can see more video and maybe stop presenting. Okay, stop my share. I clicked on stop my share. I think everybody's muted. So if
Yes.
anybody,
So if anybody wants to come off mute and ask a question, I've been watching the chat window. I don't see anything right now, but
I've got a question.
take time.
yes, Leon.
Hi, Mike. Do you think we're not out of the woods yet until maybe we get through August on some of the plants that are starting to still sputter a little bit and come out?
Absolutely. That is a really good point. And I am finding losses still. I am still finding losses on projects and in my own garden. I lost, I'm trying to think the natives. They could, one of my yopons has been in the ground for 20 years. It's a very well established plant. And the storm Uri changed its microclimate completely by taking down a number of shrubs around it and exposing it more. And it's a true multi-trunk tree. This particular specimen is 3 or 4 trunks, and all 4 trunks looked great until, I would say, May. And one of the trunks was looking like some of the foliage was iffy. And I see this thing out the kitchen window every meal. So I just slowly started to notice things flagging and didn't think much of it because that part of the tree faces my neighbor. But a week ago, I noticed a bark split. I thought that bark split wasn't there before because, that's in prime bird watching territory. And I'm noticing this huge split in the bark. And I thought, no way that thing is alive. And I walk out there and that whole trunk is dead. So I continue to lose stuff, and you will too, probably. It's interesting to see. I imagine the losses were probably most obvious on the succulents first, but these evergreens are astonishing me with their ability to kind of delay the loss of part of the plant. So that's my quick answer on that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I guess I have a question from the other perspective. I had some really big, well-established rosemary, which of course, that pretty much died off, I think, for everybody. But I have one little bit that's looking like it's really, I'm leaving it alone, I guess, in the hopes that maybe it might find its way back. I don't know if that's still possible.
Every good gardener I know is trying this, because and I don't know if you folks are like me, but you see a green thing and you really don't want to destroy it, especially if there's hope. At the core of anything we do with landscape is this concept of hope, that there will be growth and change, and that it will be for the positive. And so if you're like me and you've had rosemary for 20 years or more, and then it was annihilated, but there's, like you, I think like you, I had a sprig, and I'm watching that sprig, and I'm holding out hope. There's space for it, but I'm not optimistic, because I just think that rosemary has a tendency to be, it's one of those plants that once it's been pruned to a certain level, has a lack of vigor. And I just experience has taught me with that one that if you get it to a certain point, you have losses and you prune it back to the living wood and you expect it to bounce back, you're going to be disappointed. It's one of those plants that's on my, as a designer, I have to have, it all has to be ready for the Chamber of Commerce. It can't be, it can't be at, oh yeah, that'll come back level. That's farmer level. That's like, will it bounce back? Will it grow? Okay. But then there's Chamber of Commerce level, which is what I find myself having to work to. You have that will give you a feeling for how challenging it was to work on the city hall project when Storm Uri came through and annihilated so many plants. All of the plant people, my nurserymen, my landscape crew, the contractor, me, we're all standing there saying, oh, look at that green leaf. It's going to come back. And the whole city apparatus is standing there looking at their watches saying, will it be ready April 1st? And we were all just, that's what we have to plant to. I'm seeing comments. Any idea why hackberries are having extreme leaf drop right now in San Antonio? Well, I'm not sure on the hackberries, but I know that the cedar elms are going through the same thing. And my hunch is that they're doing the annual deal that they do every August, where they've had all of that comfort and fertility and water, and suddenly it's not there anymore. And the organism is saying, okay, what can I lose without dying? And it's a few leaves. So that's my guess. But an arborist is a better guy to ask, and that's the kind of person I would turn to ask about that. Here I'm seeing someone growing palms in Hocking Hills. Oh my God. And a banana tree in Cincinnati, between Columbus and Cincinnati, successfully under a mountain of leaf mulch. His winters include 0 days. Do I use mulch to protect vulnerable plants or any other technique? Gosh, no. I work very hard on planting design to make sure I don't have to go to extremes to protect the plants. And like you, though, I have a lot of them where I'm tempted to try. And man, I'll throw a bunch of blankets out there. I boxed some plants in this big storm event, but most of that didn't work. And I just figure it's not worth going to the trouble. I have a little greenhouse that I make out of a porch on my house, but it's gotten too small for the army of plants waiting outside. So I had some losses this year, and I just chalked it up to life experience. But I think you're smart. Your friend in Ohio is yeah, mulch is a strategy for sure. Some people do it.
Did you see the other comment on Evergreen Sumac?
Oh,
Somebody
looks
mentioned that,
horrible.
yeah, mine looks
Well,
great.
Well, Evergreen Sumac is real funny. It's native to as I understand it, it's native to the same habitats where we have ash juniper. But it also adapts to those habitats. So that would be kind of canyon, pardon me, canyons and shady and north-facing areas up in the hill country. So I'm not surprised that they are bouncing back. I don't have a lot of opportunity to work with Evergreen Sumac. They're such a slow grower. They're not really favored in the designed landscapes. They don't make their way into a lot of them, and I really wish they did, because I think they're one of our best evergreens. And red oaks, yes, we're seeing a lot of damage on oaks of all kinds. Even the native red oaks, which is astonishing because they have that hill country endemic character. But it has hit some of these trees hard. Uh, However, pulling through it, they may very well, and that's one of those things, one of those points where I'm just going to stand back and look at the arborists and ask them. I don't know if you folks have noticed, it really hurt to see how savagely Weisachs were hit this year by the storms, and I am seeing just now, just in the summer, seeing bounce back from the base of Weisachs, and just astonished at how badly they did. I knew they were tender. I had been warned for my whole career that they were iffy north of San Antonio, but now I have my evidence. And it's too bad, because I treasure them. I treasure Weisachs for their wildlife value and their fragrance and their looks. And that was just really hard to take. Yeah, an oleander crash is now coming up from the roots. That's typical. But my similarly sized Yaupon's gone forever, destined for the burn pit. I'm so sorry. That is an unusual case, I think. And so I have to wonder about whether the oleander had some kind of mitigating, whether the Yaupon had some kind of mitigating problem. Maybe it was had a change to its microclimate in recent years. Sometimes we get used to a mature plant taking care of itself, and that is an unusual case. I'm surprised. I have not heard of many Yaupons suffering that badly, and I'm sorry to hear it. I have to wonder if it had some kind of, a weakness that had come along. If they are not known for having diseases, but I wonder, it could have had pest damage. That does happen now and then. Wow, a Yaupon, 15 feet tall. That is remarkable.
I also wonder, I was just going to say, I also wonder if some of the cultivars of Yaupon are as hardy as the native ones.
That is an excellent question, because I think we will find that, cultivars are grown because they're easy to propagate, and because they hold up well in transit and in the nursery. And I think there's every possibility that there's a problem with cultivars, probably in these extreme conditions. And I have to back up a second. If you've attended, I encourage you to attend seminars on freeze damage with Texas AgriLife and other situations where you'll see lots of horticulturists. These are doctoral level people, and they will have the potential for more answers. But my experience, particularly in the spring, was a lot of people saying, we're just speculating right now because we haven't seen this in 30 years. Yes, Leo S is saying, I'm not originally from around here. What is the scientific name for Weisach? So Weisach, yes, thank you, Sherry. There you go. And it's spelled Huisache. It's a Spanish name. So no surprise that puzzled you. The Evergreen Sumac is Oh gosh, this is a test for everybody out there. It's Rus virens,
Virens.
Virens, Rus virens. And then the red oak is different from Quirkis rubra. That's the northern species. The Texas red oak is Quirkis texana, also sometimes called Spanish oak. Some people classify it as Quirkis bucklei, but that is really a different species. Sometimes a lot of us grow nursery grown cultivars that are crosses. They're natural crosses between Quirkis texana and Quirkis shumardii, which is native to East Texas and a very strong cultivar with great leaf color. If you see a Texas red oak with a leaf color that leans more red than brown, chances are really good you have one of those crosses on your hands, because the Texas red oak will only turn out a russet, kind of a russet brown, a reddish brown. Well, I have really enjoyed the discussion, folks. I always enjoy learning from you guys, which happens as much as you learning from me, I hope. I think we've covered all the questions. Have we covered all those from the chat?
It looks like you have, yes.
Okay, okay. Well, thank
thank-
you so much. I hope it was as enjoyable for you as it was for me.
Truly appreciate it. Thanks, Mike. The article you wrote earlier this year was very interesting. That's what kind of got me interested in listening to you speak a little bit more
Thanks.
on it. Interesting topics about microclimate, things
Yeah.
things we need to think about. So
Yeah, it's microclimate has a lot to do with it, and I'm discouraging people from there's nothing wrong with experimenting with the Texas natives that are not endemic. I want to emphasize that, but I do think this is going to be the year that a lot of my colleagues get serious about planting native first. This will be the year when people start really seeing the benefits 365 days. So I kind of saw Storm Uri as a huge opportunity. It's going to haunt the landscape industry for years. We are going to have trouble getting mature trees for years in the marketplace, but it's going to be worth it, because we're going to have a whole generation of landscape workers and professionals who really gained a lot of knowledge this time.
all right. Well, thank you again. We truly appreciated it, and hope everybody else enjoyed as much as I did. I think we had a
Yes,
lot
thank
of
you.
thank yous that came out already. So yeah,
Yeah.
appreciate it a lot.
I appreciate
you.
it too. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mike.
Good to meet you
Very
all.
informative.
I
Yeah, thank you very
appreciate it.
much.
I'll let you
Thank you so
go.
much.
Okay, thank you again.
I'm going to find well, they may not let me go. You have to find the leave button.
All right,
Okay.
I'll take care of that. All right. It's good to see everybody.
Thank
See
you.
you next month.
Thanks, everybody, for attending. Thanks for the guests.